So hello, good evening and welcome everyone. This is week 17 of our conversations on community resilience in changing times. And this evening we are doing another part 2 session on reimagining food or food resilience. And we have the lovely Wendy and Cathy back with us again. So lovely to have you ladies back with us. Hello and welcome. And we also have a new addition to this conversation who is MOTHIN Ali. Hello MOTHIN, nice to have you with us.
How are you doing? Thank you very much for having me on.
Very, very welcome. I'm very excited to have MOTHIN as an addition to this dialogue because, as you will find out if you stay with us, he has lots to offer on this topic, which is very rich. So I'm really looking forward to hearing more about MOTHIN's background and bringing you into this conversation. So before we begin, food resilience. Cathy, have you got something to tell us about food resilience and why it's important right now?
Why is food resilience important? It's important from many different viewpoints. Obviously, we need to feed everybody. We need to feed everybody nourishing food. We have been in crisis. A lot of the UK has experienced more crisis than normal. I'm saying UK because I'm imagining most of our listeners are UK based. We've been experiencing an unprecedented threat to our food system. So we need to feed people now. We need to feed them nourishing food because healthy food makes a huge difference both to your physical health and your mental health. And we also need to have really effective, grounded plans in place for future issues, which are looking every day more likely to happen. So we're addressing, while we have time, in relative ease because things are likely to get worse, what we can be putting in place now to ensure a healthy food supply in the future.
Great, thank you for that. And MOTHIN, part of what MOTHIN's going to be doing in this conversation, hopefully, is sharing with us some real sort of practical how-tos as he runs something called My Family Garden, which is a YouTube channel where he shares his wisdom from his ancestry around how to create beautiful gardens and really resilient food solutions. So I'll just introduce our speakers and then I will invite you just to say a little bit more about yourselves. So first of all, MOTHIN Ali, who's our new speaker this week. MOTHIN is a creator of My Family Garden, the YouTube channel, as I mentioned. So do have a look on YouTube, My Family Garden. He gardens and grows food in a backyard setting based on the knowledge passed down from generations of growers from Bangladesh. He is also founder of a project called Dig It Out, working to expose and challenge racial inequality in the gardening community within the UK. So really glad to have MOTHIN with us on this dialogue. And we have Wendy Freeman back with us. Hello, Wendy.
Hi.
And just to say hello. So Wendy does have a slight internet challenge, possibly. So we may have her in or out, but that's just real life, isn't it? So hopefully she'll be with us for most of it. So Wendy is acting locally, permaculture designer, learning new neighbour timeworn methods of food production, globally a volunteer of sustainability, degrowth, climate change and social inequality activism. So really glad to have you back with us, Wendy.
Thanks, Catherine.
Very welcome. Sorry for the noise in the background. And last but definitely no means least, we have Cathy Hilton back with us again. Cathy teaches how to harness the opportunities of loss to create profound fulfilment. She has a passion for resilient ways of engaging with food and is an advocate for change. So good to have you back with us again, Cathy. So yeah, as we've got MOTHIN with us this week, who we didn't get to know in our first conversation, I thought it'd be good to hear a bit more from you, MOTHIN, and I wondered if you could tell us a bit more about your background in relation to this topic and what inspired you to create My Family Garden.
So you mentioned that I run a YouTube channel called My Family Garden, and basically the reason that we started this YouTube channel was there's quite a few different reasons. There's one of the big reasons was that when we get on when you look around, the whole gardening sphere is dominated by white middle class people. When I turn the TV on, there's not very many people that look like me. There's not very many people that will sound like me with a regional accent, with a broad Yorkshire accent. There's not, you don't get that on TV. Even with YouTubers, it's still the ones that are working in an area that appeals to the most people. They're all white middle class people. They're not ethnic minorities. They're not working class. So when we started our YouTube channel, we thought, right, okay, we've got to show who we actually are. You know, we're a small family. We're doing what we're doing in our backyard, and we're trying to grow food to feed ourselves, to feed our children, and we've got to show that. You know, we've got to be honest about that and not be afraid of demonstrating that to people, and not breaking down those barriers as well. You know, so that's one of the reasons that we started the channel. But who am I, and where do I come from, and what is my background? I mean, one of the things that I grew up in a terraced house. So I grew up in a terraced house, the old Victorian style, you know, the Industrial Revolution style terraced houses, that you come out of your front door and you're on the main road, and you go out your back door and you've got a few feet of concrete. And that was basically our house. Our concrete was our garden. Yeah. So you know, James Wong was tweeting the other day about how gardens are supposed to be aesthetic features and how they're supposed to be really beautiful things and people tailor them. I was like, man, my garden was, for most of my life, my garden was 4 foot of concrete. Yeah. And even then we still used it to the most, you know, which we pumped out of it as much as we could. Because what my mum did was she put planters on there. She got an old bathtub. Well, I got an old bathtub for her, and I made her a couple of planters, and then she was growing beans in there, squash in there. In that amount of space, she was still growing coriander, spinach. You know, through the most of the season, she was still growing a little bit of something. You know, so when we're talking about food resilience, we're talking about stuff like what we're actually doing in our, you know, for ourselves. We're actually living this sort of thing. Because I talked to you about it the other day. When it comes to real food and real nutritious organic food, we can't afford that. You know, we can't afford to buy that sort of stuff. I mean, it's one of those things that would be really nice to be able to do, is go to the shop and buy free range everything and organic eggs and, you know, organic, all the organic vegetables. It'd be really nice to be able to do that. I mean, I'd love to be able to live in a world where I could go and do that. But with my family, with my budget, even now, I can't do that. You know, we're lucky. We're lucky to have the garden that we've got now, and where we can grow some, you know, real vegetables without any added chemicals to it, without any added pesticides, herbicides, anything like that. We're growing without any of that sort of stuff. We're getting real nutritious food, and it's all being organically grown. We don't use any chemicals. We don't use, the only fertilizers that we use come from our chickens. Yeah, we keep chickens. We keep our own eggs. So the fertilizer comes from them, and it's just a continuous cycle. You know, all our waste just goes back into the garden. So when we're doing this sort of thing, it's like, it's a reminder back to when my father would. What's happened here? So here's a couple of pictures from my garden. Now this is some of my potatoes that I grew last year, and these are potatoes that are growing wood chips. So I don't grow in the conventional way. I do a system of no-dig gardening, but I don't do the no-dig gardening where people will tell you to just lay a compost on top of cardboard and plant through that. I don't do that. I use a lot of wood chips. I believe heavily in using mulch. This is one of the things that my parents used to do, that they've taught me, is value the use of mulch, and don't limit yourself to mulch with one thing. I mean, here's where I'm using cardboard as mulch, and I'm planting through the cardboard. and I'm planting squash and pumpkins. And you might notice that they're really close together, the plants, and these are really big plants. But because they're really close together, because the soil's so fertile, I can get away with them being close together. And just behind the squash, I've got beans planted. So they're fixing nitrogen and feeding the soil that way. This is the seating area, so we've got some flowers and stuff for the bees and just something nice to look at as well. But yeah, this is last year's runner beans. We always do well with runner beans. I mean, so if someone was gonna grow some vegetable that's really easy to grow, that's really easy to save seed from, that you're going to be able to continuously get a good harvest through the season, runner beans is one that you can't go wrong with. If you plant them now, about May time, either in pots, or if you wait a couple of weeks, plant them directly into the ground, you can have a nice harvest of runner beans from now all the way up until the end of August. And if you save your seeds, then you've got your own seeds to plant again next year. You're not going to have to worry about buying seeds in. This was one of my best squash harvests. So there's all kinds of different squash here. There's pumpkins, there's marrows, the big green one in the middle, that's a type of bottle gourd, but it's a round type of bottle gourd. I mean, this is one of the things that we grow our own vegetables. When we grow our own vegetables, we try and grow things that are quite traditional and quite have some sort of cultural significance to what we're growing. Now, these kind of gourds, they're massively expensive when you buy them from the shop. They're £7-8 a kilo for this sort of stuff. And if you're going to buy that, it works out really expensive for a small family. And most of that is just shipping costs, because they don't grow so well, or people over here or in Europe don't grow them as much. They're shipped all the way from India, from Bangladesh, from Thailand, from all of that sort of Southeast Asia region. And the majority of the cost is just in shipping. So it's not in the actual price of the item. It's all the shipping costs that rockets the price up. So why waste all those food miles? Why waste all those mileage, acres and acres of food miles? We can just grow them locally. We might have to be a bit more careful about it and give it a bit more tender love and care in the earlier part of the season, but we can still get a good harvest from it. We still get a really good harvest from it, and it gives us that cultural significance, because people will, harvesting a bottle gourd in our family is an event. The whole family will come around. People, neighbours will get involved and say, wow, look at, we'll auction some off to raise money for the mosques. So it's a real event. It's something that's of real significance. So it's not just like growing a marrow. It's not just like growing a pumpkin, but it has that value, additional value to it. So that's one of my pear trees that's in fruit, in bloom. So this is one of the first things that I did when I started my garden, was when we got our garden, when I bought my house in 2009. And like I say, I mean, we lived in a terraced house for most of our lives, and we never owned our own house. We always lived in sort of rented houses, or privately rented houses, where so we never owned our own house. And one of the things that I promised my mum was always that when I start working, I'm gonna buy you a house. I'm gonna buy, that's the thing, what I'm gonna do for you. And it's a funny story. When I bought this house, was because my mum was away when I bought this. Yeah, it was in 2009. My mum was in Bangladesh, and me and my sister came out and saw this house and said, right, okay. My sister saw the garden and she said, this has got to be it. The house was a complete mess. Plaster was falling off the walls. It was literally, they'd covered some of the dodgy defects in the walls and the ceilings up with polystyrene tiles. As soon as we took that off, the walls came down with it. But we were like, no, regardless of all of that, it's got this garden, it's got this potential that we can grow our own food. We can have that freedom that we never had as kids. My children can have that freedom, and my children can get get into some outside space that we were never able to do. So we bought this house in 2009, and the first thing that I did was we got in before I decided on planting where my raised beds and everything are going to go. The first thing that I did was I put in the fruit trees. And the way I've set my garden is I've set it and I've designed it almost like a Bangladeshi village. The way they'd be set would be the house would be at one end, then there'd be perimeter, the border would be edible trees, woodland trees, trees that you can use for wood or bamboo or stuff that you can, functional items. And then within that space, then I've got my open area for in my case it's a lawn, but that lawn is a functional area where the kids can play, where I can do my building stuff and my little projects and stuff. And then just behind that, I've got all my raised beds and all my garden area. So I know a lot of permies might listen and think this guy's got a lawn and think, oh no, write him off straight away. But yeah, I do have a little bit of a lawn, and I do grow a bit, and I do have a bit of grass that the kids can play on, that I can build stuff on. I mean, we were painting a trellis on there today, so it's very functional rather than just something that we're growing just for the sake of growing some grass. But after that, I've got to keep chickens. So I mean, this is a picture from a couple of years ago where I'm just gonna have a look at those. The 4 on the left, they're all home reared chickens. So the 4 on the left, apart from the one on the right, that's the other 4 were all hatched at home. One of the sad things is we when this picture was taken, we had something like 15 or 16 chickens. Last year, they're all our chickens have come up quite old. So last year we lost about 10 chickens, so we're down to about 6 at the moment. But I've got some more in an incubator at the minute. I've got some eggs in an incubator at the minute, so hopefully in a couple of weeks we'll hatch some more chickens in our house. And this is the amazing thing, that hatching chickens at home, hatching chicks at home. My children are getting that richness, and they're getting that into their lives where they can see, the process of a baby chick hatch and grow into a fully grown chicken, and then lay eggs, and then go through that cycle again. And it's something there's a massive disconnect nowadays between people, wildlife, nature, food, because of the way we live in cities and we're away from everything so much, that we're just miles away from it all. So the picture you've got up now, that's one of my bottle gourd plants, and yeah, I just grow that over a trellis and let the bottle gourds hang down once they grow, and then underneath that I'll grow onions, I'll grow my potatoes, I'll grow things that can tolerate a little bit of shade but still want fertile soil. So that's, yeah, now we're into my greenhouse, and this is my greenhouse from last year, and this is a variety of tomatoes called sweet million tomatoes. I mean, they're a hybrid variety, but they're a really productive variety of tomatoes. I think on one of these plants in my greenhouse I got 14 trusses, and that's a completely unheated greenhouse. It's I'm pretty north, I'm in Leeds, so quite north, and I'm getting 14 trusses of tomatoes in a greenhouse. Yeah, so here there's loads of bottle gourds on your left hand side there. So a couple of bottle gourds, a couple of shark fin gourds, some chard, and the big long things, taro leaves. So this is another one. In Bangladesh, this would be one of those plants that's just growing wild everywhere. It's just growing wild. It's almost like an invasive weed. But over here, it's so valued because you can't get hold of it over here. You can't get taro leaves over here. You might be able to get taro tubers, and you might be able to get edos or muki, as we call it, and get those from the shop. But the leaves, you can't get those. And we'll cook that down, cook it into a nice, it'll turn into a nice, use it like a spinach, cook it with prawns. Absolutely delicious. Oh, that's one. So snake gourds, or sisinga as we call it in Bangla. Another one that's a very staple of Bangladeshi Southeast Asian cuisine. This is just a bed of cover crops. So this is what I wanted to talk to you about as well. Is, do you know, a lot of people will leave their beds or leave their gardens empty and just leave the gardens uncovered over winter. This is what my garden looks like through the winter. So unless it completely, you know, my garden looked like this all the way through to this February. So I sowed these cover crops probably in about November time through December, January, to until we had those really severe frosts in February. My garden looked like this. So there's not many garden beds that are growing as green as this through the whole of winter, and it's just mustard. It's a mixture of mustard and rye that I've used as a cover crop. And once that breaks down, I'm just gonna just sheet mulch over the top of that, let it feed the soil, and then it's just adding more fertility to my garden. So yeah, that's a little bit about me and a little bit about my garden.
Thank you so much, Martin, and I'm glad we shared your pictures, because it's really nice to actually give a visual image to what you're creating. And I know when we talked beforehand, I was really glad to hear the kind of the background story that you brought to this about, you know, that there isn't much diversity in the gardening community. You're really right, and I'm really glad that you're doing what you're doing, because we need more diversity. We need, and also the richness of what you bring from your Bangladeshi culture. You know, you said you create your garden like a Bangladeshi village, and there's so much knowledge and richness there that I think you're teaching us. So I'm really grateful. Thank you so much.
The thing is, with a lot of the knowledge, it's coming from my parents, it's coming from my mum. I mean, one of the things that I didn't mention was that some of my earliest memories were being around on my dad's allotment. The first time I ever saw someone use trench composting was when my dad, my mum, my brother, my elder brother and my elder sister, they dug a massive, they pretty much dug the whole allotment out and just filled it with manure. And then they just, buried it again. And I was like, whoa, I've never, but it didn't click until we got this garden. What they were actually doing, it didn't actually register. This is what they're doing until we got moved here. And it's the same thing with, like raised beds and no dig. When I was a kid, we were lucky enough to spend a year out in Bangladesh in one stretch. So I was probably about 11 at the time, 11, 12. So I was too young. So my older brother was a couple of years older, 3 years older. He was out, he was getting into town and he was getting into visiting different places. But I was too young to go with all those guys. And so I was left behind in the village. But it gave me the chance to go with my uncle into the fields and, go with my cousins into the fields and watch what they're doing, how they're keeping cows, how they're feeding the cows, where, moving them from one place to another. But one of the interesting things is that they used to get, hyacinth. Now, water hyacinth is an invasive plant over there, and other water plants like lilies and stuff like that. So they'd drag those out of the water, they'd stack them up. And then once they're broken down a little bit, they'll plant into there. So you've got this massive mound of hyacinth and water plants that are breaking down, and then they'll plant a squash into there, and then you've got this massive squash plant growing over the top. So, but that sort of stuff, when you see it at that age, it doesn't really click until someone tells you, "Oh, this is what they're doing." So it doesn't. Like when I heard about no dig, I was like, "Oh, okay, this is what these guys were doing." It doesn't quite. When you see it first time, you don't join the dots.
Yeah, it's not until you kind of see it in action, really, is it? Which is what makes a difference. Yeah, thanks so much. Thanks for sharing all that. And we're definitely going to hear a bit more from you as we go in this conversation. I just thought it would be nice to hear a little bit from Wendy and Cathy, and I was particularly interested in how things have been for you since our first dialogue, the first sharing of this topic. And if anything has kind of come up for you since that conversation. Either of you, don't know if you fancy sharing. who's going to speak first? Cathy, do you want to go first?
Okay, I will. I think the thing that I felt most strongly after our last conversation was that people, I'm speaking again primarily to the communities I know in the UK, people don't feel confident to be in action. There are people who are gardeners, there are people who have the land and who have some ease in setting up their food security. And if you don't have that background and if you don't have the land, people don't feel confident. So we have looked at how Catherine and I have been in conversation looking at what we can do to further support that. And we are, I'm not sure how much we're going to say right now, but we're planning on something called Food Resilience Advocates, which will be a project. It'll be a way of supporting people to move more fully themselves into action, looking to support people where they lack confidence or don't know how to access resources. So I was left with the sense of we need more people with the sense that they have agency, more people with the sense that they can impact their own food security. And for people who can't immediately see how to do that, we need to give more support.
Yeah, thank you. And that sort of links to something that MOTHIN said, that, you know, good food can't just be for the privileged, right? You know, we all have a birthright to good food, you know, so this is a way of kind of creating that for ourselves without necessarily having the financial resources to get that. So Wendy, how's it been for you since our last conversation? Anything come to light for you?
Yeah, it's interesting what Cathy mentions rang true for me as well. I mean, we were discussing between the three of us, and I think of the three of us on the first talk, I'm the only one that's growing food. I've got a bit of land and I'm growing food. And so it just came through to me very strongly, also with feedback on the talk when it was on Facebook, that I saw from a couple of friends, that, as Martin says, a lot of people were never exposed as children to food growing at home for all sorts of different reasons. And so I am at the moment quite busy. I'm in Portugal and it's spring, so I'm quite busy growing food, but I'm also spending more time on the internet, interacting with people, giving input, giving feedback. Yeah, and just the simple things. I mean, I think sharing Martin's videos, which are fabulous. He has a small goal to focus on one, growing beans or mush, or I think people have an idea there's such a lot involved, but actually people get quite a lot of confidence starting with just a window garden and just a couple of beans in a pot, and then realize how that is. And I think we chatted briefly about, I don't think we were talking about people growing fields of in their back garden and becoming independent in rice, or, you know, growing their own house or anything like that. It's just, especially as it says, some of the cultural food that's easy to access, really good to start with seeds at home, friends, and yeah. So that's what I've been internet then actually growing.
Thanks, Wendy. I'd for anyone who's watching me, you did cut in and out a little bit during that, so sorry if anyone missed what you said, but I think I got the gist of what you said, so hopefully other people did. So Cathy, I wonder if I can come to you next, because I know that something I was really left with from our last conversation was the document that you produced and that you referenced in our conversation, which is available wherever you're listening to this conversation. We've made it available again. So if you're listening on if you're on the live feed, it's the first comment on the live feed is the document of all the different food resilience projects in the UK. And we will also make it available on the YouTube and podcast link as well. So yeah, I just wanted to ask you a bit more about that. I understand you were looking at the ongoing work of those organisations that you told us about.
Yeah.
Just wonder if you could tell us a bit more about the developments that came out of that.
Yeah, so I was left last time with a sense that absolutely we need to take the initiative. We need to regard ourselves as the person responsible for our individual food resilience. And we, in our last conversation, were encouraging people to take that perspective. And we were also pretty resigned about having any expectations of government and any expectations of our local councils. And I have good news from a Devon perspective. Looking today at what had developed since February, when we did our talk and when I produced that document. So something called the Devon Food Partnership has been formed, which is very, very, very significant news. There's a website, the Devon Food devonfoodpartnership.org.uk, and they are bringing together of all interested parties in Devon, and interested parties includes just normal people. They're really inviting anybody who is willing to be a stakeholder to join in this initiative. And then Devon County Council is thoroughly on board, and they're working with the method of an organisation called Sustainable Food Places. And that is an incredible piece of work, really incredible piece of work. It tells local authorities how to set up ongoing food resilience for their region. Food resilience meaning how to feed everybody now, how to feed everybody healthy food now, how to mitigate ecological destruction, how to have as little ecological destruction as is possible, because we all know that food miles and some of the crops we've been growing have had really bad effects on our ecology, and how to build systems, as in what crops to choose and how to ensure distribution in crisis situations. So the fact that our Devon Council is really now on the case with that is something that we weren't able to say in February. And they really are inviting people to join in. And that organisation is only going to be as good as the effort that we put into it. So this is a really strong invitation to join in. And what you will appreciate, I hope, is that we can, so people who are good at growing food, people who become good at growing food can take care of themselves and take care of their loved ones. But if there are crisis situations, you're going to need the people around you to also have become good at producing food and having a reliable supply of food. Just being a small hub of people who have food isn't going to make you safe. So it does need to be the sort of initiative where we focus as much on community effect as on personal effect.
Thanks, Cathy. It's really good to hear that. I just had a look for the website address you just mentioned, devonfoodpartnership.co.uk, did you say?
No, devonfoodpartnership.org.uk.
.org.uk, okay, because I just had a look and it didn't seem to work, so okay. So we will endeavour to share that link. Is it on the list? Is it on the document?
Yeah, I just edited the document today and included that.
You have, okay, fantastic. Yeah. So wherever you're watching or listening to this, that will be on the Google document that's tagged with this conversation.
And also the Sustainable Food Places, there's a link to the Sustainable Food Places initiative, which is really, really everything you could want it to be. It's an incredible resource, it really is.
Okay, I mean, I know you mentioned as well about food citizenship.
Yeah, well, I was going to say that that's the most exciting initiative that I came across. But what was exciting about it was the fact that it was calling us to take agency. It was calling us to change our perspective from people who just are on the receiving end of a food supply system to people who are at cause in what food we receive. And that's obviously a fundamental mindset, and one that really needs to happen for a individual and a community to experience food security. I was going to say that's the most significant thing, but now that I'm seeing that we've taken further steps to making things happen locally in Devon, then I'm saying get involved. I'm saying that's more important. There's now an organisation that can help us make fundamental changes at a regional level, and that's what we need to do.
Yeah, great. Thank you. Thank you. Wendy, I don't know, so Wendy, just to say, she's having problems with her internet. She is with us, but her camera is off. So if you're watching live on Facebook, you won't be able to see her, but she is here. Wendy, I don't know if you just had anything to add at this point, just to check in with you. And you can keep your camera off if you want, as long as we can hear you.
It's Catherine. No, nothing particular to add. My internet is to be sharing. Apologies.
Yeah, okay. All right. So yeah, MOTHIN, I'd love to ask you a bit more about you know, what kind of, where to begin, I guess, if someone's thinking about, yeah, I'd like to get into food growing, I don't have much space. This is something we talked about in the last conversation, is, you know, what are our options if we haven't got our own land? Cathy, did you want to add something before
I want to add another perspective to the question, which is if you're going to be on the move, because this is an issue for me. I have moved, and I will also probably move during this year. So there's no point in, I have related to it as there's no point in investing much in the garden where I'm at, or it needs to be something that can be easily transported.
Okay, so maybe that's another question. I don't know if MOTHIN's got any ideas for that one. But if we say, should we look at the stationary option first? So we do live somewhere, but we might not have much space. Like you talked about in your earlier years, you just had kind of 4 foot of something, I can't remember the word you used, but something that you grew in. You know, what I heard in that is you don't need a big garden necessarily to get going. What's a kind of simple way to get going with food growing?
When we can tackle Cathy's question at the same time, I think, because
okay, go for it.
A lot of it, if you focus around container growing, then it's mobile. It'll fit into a small space, but as well, it's mobile. So recently, I mean, I mentioned when I got this house, the first thing that I did was plant these big trees, or these trees, young trees that were going to grow into big trees. And they were going to be my long-term investment. Now you can do that same thing, but you can buy dwarfing varieties of fruit trees. If you look around on the internet, sort of December, January time, when it's bare root season, you can pick up some really good bargains. I mean, I bought 6 trees for 6 trees for about 30-35 pounds, something like that. So I got a couple of apples, a pear, a plum, a peach, a cherry. So pretty much all the fruit that you're going to need, and they're all on dwarfing rootstocks. So I've got them growing in 10-litre pots, so I can move them around wherever I want on my around my patio area. Now, if you haven't got that sort of area, you can keep, even if you can't grow 6 trees like that, you'll be able to manage at least 1 or a couple, even if it's on your front doorstep. And this is the way we used to do it. I mean, we used to have all our vegetables right on our front doorstep in a massive bathtub, and a couple of containers. Cathy, do you want to come in there?
I wonder how big is your family, and are you actually feeding your family through the year with that sort of land area? What are we talking?
I was wondering that as well.
I mean, my garden now, it's not massive. It's probably double the size of a normal back garden, but it is a back garden. It's not. I'm not on a farm. I'm not on a field or anything. I'm not on a small holding. So it is. So it's a large back garden. It's on a corner plot. I think it's about 50 meters from my front gate to the back gate, to the back fence. So it's quite long. And we grow up until last year. We were self-sufficient in one vegetable, and that was garlic. So, I mean, I think we use a lot of garlic in our cooking. So we use a lot of garlic in our cooking. We probably go through a couple of maybe a kilo a week. So I grew some. I think my harvest was close to 60 kilos of garlic last year. But I'm not just growing garlic for the sake of garlic. I'm growing garlic because it's a plant that I can. It's good for me. It's good for my chickens, because I feed it to my chickens as well. But it's not just that. It's a form of pest control, because I can use garlics, interplanted amongst my leafy vegetables and amongst my beans, and I had them around my broad beans. So I'd like a broad bean plant, garlics on one side, onions on the other side, coriander on the other side. So it was like a square circle, basically, with these smelly plants around it. And while everyone was complaining of, oh, I've got black fly attacks on my broad bean, I didn't notice a single black fly in my garden. So, but if we so there's little tricks that you can do like that. I mean, when we're talking about self-sufficiency, I don't think we're ever going to be self-sufficient on our own. There's a couple of ways, a couple of things we can be self-sufficient in, is be self-sufficient in seeds. Seeds is such a precious commodity. I mean, it's one of the things that you can not only provide for yourself and your future, your personal future, but you can provide your community's future just by saving seeds. And like I was talking about with the runner beans are bean plants and peas. They're probably the easiest plant to save seeds from. All you do is pick a pod up when it's ripe and just leave it, and then next year you crack it open and plant your pods. Plant your peas or your beans. So it's probably the easiest one to save seeds from. But and this is one of the things that, like I mentioned about the hybrid tomatoes that I was growing, and people will say, oh, don't grow hybrid tomatoes, grow heirloom tomatoes because they'll breed true and all of this sort of nonsense. Yeah, fine, they will breed true to type, fine. But have you ever grown a tomato and it's turned into an apple? Yeah, if you plant a tomato seed, it's going to grow as a tomato. You see, so all right, it might not be the same tomato that you grew, but you're going to get a tomato. If you plant an apple seed, you're going to get an apple. You're not going to get an orange. So saving those seeds, even if you're not a professional seed saver and you're not, taking all the care in the world, so you get the perfect germination and the perfect seed to try and breed it true to type. Just save some seeds, man. Just get some, just get involved, whether it's peas or something like that. You start saving some of those. So that'll be, then you'll be able to go through the whole cycle from seed, your own seed, to harvest. And that's what we used to do with our garlic. We'd grow enough garlic for us to eat, but then we'd have like 5 or 10, I think this year I planted about 5 kilos of garlic. Last year it was a bit more. And the reason that we've cut back on the amount of garlic that we're planting is we got a bit of allium root rot in our garden. So that's a disease that can, if it is confirmed that it's that, and it can last in the garden for a very long time, and it could mean that we're not growing garlics or onions anymore. So it's a bit of bad news there, but I'm trying a couple of experimental things to try and treat that garlic. So what I did at the end of last season was I put a load of garlic powder down and dug that in, and I'm going to do that, and I'm going to do the same thing again in the bed that I've discovered the rot in, to try and get the bacteria to the fungus to breathe through and go through its life cycle a little bit quicker. We'll see if it works.
I'll be interested to hear how that pans out. So something that's in my mind, and I'd be interested to ask both of you, is that what's really clear, and it's lovely to be able to grow your own food. Some people can, some people can't, some people can do it in small amounts, great, but what's really clear is it's not going to be self-sufficient, us growing our own food, unless we have, you know, a massive piece of land or something. Then even then I don't think it's going to be self-sufficient. So if we're really looking at sort of re-empowering ourselves at local level with our food needs, what do you think is the best way to go with that? Open to either of you.
I think, you know, like the work that Cathy's been doing and some of the research that she's done about finding community links, that's where the key is. That's where the real power is. You know, having those community links, having what we're doing now is we're talking to each other. We're before Wendy tagged me in this and said, why don't you get involved in this? I didn't know this was going on. So it's little things like that, but we can trigger a spark in someone to say, okay, look, why don't you do something? And I've actually got some inspiration from this, and I'm thinking, right, okay, what I'm going to do is, off the back of this, I'm going to set myself up a little seed bank. You know, I've got my channel, I've got close to 30,000 subscribers there. I've got my Facebook group, I've got close to 1,000 people in there, and it's a really nice little community. So why not set up a seed bank and say, okay, right, guys, next year, whatever seeds you want to buy, don't buy here, just cover the postage and take the seeds from here. We'll ship to each other.
That's such a lovely idea. I love that so much. Thank you.
Such a lovely idea.
It's you guys that have just put, you know, after meeting you for the first time last week, you've put that idea into my head. So
nice to hear that. See, we're spreading good ideas. That's always a good thing, hey?
You know, we don't know what spark we're going to set off in someone else. Yeah. Sometimes we don't hear the result, but we don't. Because I mean, I'm a trained imam at a mosque as well, so I do a lot of outreach work in that sort of sense. And I remember having a conversation with a young man, and I said to him, okay, he was saving up some money to go on holiday, and I said, okay, why don't you save your money up? Or instead of going there, why don't you go on Hajj? Why don't you go perform the pilgrimage? And a few years later, he went on Hajj. He came back, and one day out of the blue, he said to me, "Can you remember this conversation you had with me at this time?" I'm like, barely. It was because you said that to me. This is why I went and completed my Hajj. And I'm like, okay, look, you know, I was completely blown away, because it was like, to me, it was just some, you know, it was almost like it was just a conversation. It was, and it just reminded me of the power of what we can, you know, the influence that we can have on each other. And it's either we influence each other in a good way, or we influence each other in a way that we're gonna, you know, carry on being consumers and destroying the planet.
Cathy, anything to add to that?
Just that it's fabulous. Yeah, I'm so pleased to hear you speaking of the cascading impact of conversations like this and how important it is. And in fact, I got a message today from somebody in Germany who what they sent was that they had just watched part 1 of this, and how valuable they'd found it, and that they had only previously considered sustainability and not resilience. And that's a very intelligent teacher in Germany. So she's a highly educated person who was well versed in the perspective of, we need to be forming a world that is sustainable, that all our systems need to be continuable in our ecological situation. But she hadn't considered resilience. It just wasn't a concept that had come to her at all. So we are, in simply having these conversations, certainly we're doing great things. And I hope people can also grasp that we do need solutions to be broad ranging, because wars are fought over food.
Yeah.
And they're not just fought over food, they're fought because of food. When a population starts struggling with their food, everything goes to pot, and people start emigrating. People's mental and physical health absolutely drops. People behave inhumanely. So it's not something we can just solve for ourselves. We do have to do both, solving it for ourselves and solving it for our loved ones and solving it for our street, our town, our nation. But we also have seen through COVID, and hopefully are more and more aware, that we must consider the impacts for everybody. Or, I mean, I don't want the end of the sentence to be a selfish one, or we're in trouble, but fundamentally, if you only solve it for yourself, you haven't solved it.
Yeah, that just brought to mind for me something I'm hearing rounded about in terms of thinking about food security and food resilience is stocking up food. And I know when the pandemic came in the beginning, I got caught up in the panic buying at one point. I had a moment of panic buying, and I went and got everything I could from the supermarkets. It was in that really frantic time where that was going on, and I panicked, and I got enough food that lasted me 2 weeks, and then I ate 2 weeks worth of food, and I was like, okay, now what? it just was so apparent to me, having done that's not it for me. It just wasn't the solution, and it made me very aware that's it was a very selfish response to just think about my own needs and kind of, yeah, just give myself 2 weeks worth of food. But what's 2 weeks worth of food, you know? And I've been thinking since then, you know, what could I have done in that moment that could be supporting the community, you know, that we can be pooling our resources together, because that is really where the strength is, isn't it? It's like to work together as a community. I mean, I'm just thinking about different models of how we could do that, you know, maybe even food buying, that we work as a community and we, you know, will maybe one household gets 3 lots of items, you know, a bulk of 3 lots of items, and another household could do the same, and then we share our resources as a community. Do you think something like that could work? Is it viable? Cathy?
Yeah, so certainly it does, and it is worth looking at that document, because I have referenced in there quite a few different initiatives, food buying cooperatives. Yeah, it's an option. It only solves a few things. So it solves making food more affordable, and it can solve the being able to hold a quantity of something. But if our world is heading to crisis situations ecologically, it's still far too short-term a solution.
Just to add on this slightly different angle, I mean, we're talking about from our own perspective, we're relatively comfortable. I mean, a couple of years ago, me and a couple of friends of mine, we started off a small community soup kitchen, food bank, that sort of thing, because we saw that the amount of people who were actually, after the benefit cuts that the government were making, people were literally choosing between eating and heating. I mean, it's a often repeated phrase, but they were literally choosing between that, and because and people on the streets, where are they getting their food from? And are they getting decent food? So we set up a food bank where initially it was the 3 of us, we set it up, and we were financing it ourselves. So each week we'd cook the food at home. So whatever we'd be eating that week, we'd just make sure that we cooked an extra pot full, enough to feed 10, 15 people, pack that up, take it along. And it was just 3 guys walking about the streets in Bradford, just handing food out to people. From there, we've moved on to a point where we're collecting regular donations from large supermarkets. So stuff that they're about to throw out, you know, stuff when they've overbaked loads of bread and they haven't been able to sell it, they'll give us a call and say, do you want this, do you want all this bread? So one of our guys will just quickly get down there, pick up a load of bread and call up people who wants bread, come and get it. Same thing, but we're doing that with clothes. We're doing that. I mean, one thing that's quite often forgotten about is women's sanitary products. You know, there's a really cool organization in Bradford, and they specialize in that. So toiletries, ladies, products that that you need. They're really specialists in this, so they'll come along and they'll just make up little hygiene packs, and especially for people who are on the streets, these are life-saving packs. You know, that they're really important. So if those kind of models really need to be in place right now, because okay, we're thinking if the worst happens, are we going to be able to eat next week? But these people aren't able to eat right now.
Absolutely. That's very true. And that flags another thing for me about our food waste, because I think it's 1/3 of all food production is wasted, you know, particularly in supermarkets. And I know there are some supermarkets who are being very active with passing it on to food banks. I know some do. I know the Co-op particularly are doing really well with that at the moment. But I don't know, is there anything that we can be doing locally to encourage a bit more of that, you know, making better use of our resources?
Can you ask the question again, please?
Okay, so I'm aware that I think the statistics, if I might have it wrong, is 1/3 of our food production. So that's in cafes, supermarkets, everything that kind of, 1/3 of it goes to waste. So 1/3 of what we do have as our food resources is going to waste. And I know that some companies are trying to do something about that and, you know, connecting with food banks and things like that. But there's still an awful lot that is going to waste. What could we do at local level to do something about that? You know, is it worth us going and having a chat with managers and shops or something like that? Yeah, Cathy?
I think it's worth investigating what's already in place, because there is quite a lot already in place. So certainly locally in Devon, I should have reminded myself, but I didn't. But I think 12 different organisations came together under an umbrella name, I can't remember the name, as the pandemic began, to pool their food bank and meal preparation and food distribution services that had been being performed by different organisations across different towns in the area, and they are very much working in partnership with supermarkets and at that point restaurants as well, who had surplus. There's an app now called Olio, OLIO, which anybody can use on any scale. So if you're somebody who's got half a loaf of bread that's going to waste, you can just post about that and maybe somebody around the corner could use it. Or if all your bananas have gone ripe at the same time, you know, that can be small scale individual use, and something like that is only as effective as the usage that we put into it. So we do need people to support that sort of thing.
Yeah, I recently signed up to Olio, so I've just come across it, and I think a lot of what they do is around food, isn't it? I think that's a big portion of what they're doing is food sharing. So yeah, anything to add to this one, Martin?
Yeah.
I mean, it was just more from a perspective of, okay, these kind of projects are absolutely brilliant, but there's some legislations that stop waste food being used. Do you know, there's legislation that, for example, if you're a backyard chicken keeper, you can't, if you're not a vegan household, you can't feed your kitchen scraps to your chickens, because according to DEFRA's legislations and DEFRA's rules, is because there's a risk of contamination of meat products going into the chickens. So even if I've taken a banana into my kitchen and that banana spoiled, I can't feed that banana to my chickens, even though it's never been near any meat. So those kind of things, that if we could put pressure on governments to change those kind of things, to say, right, we need to be really careful, but allow especially people who are working in backyards, who are having controlled flocks that aren't, producing meat from, for mass markets. Why can't we feed our animals our waste products? I mean, in the old days, in the Victorian days, a family would normally have a pig in the, a family would have a pig in the kitchen, lived in the yard, and they'd feed all the waste scraps to the pig, and then they'd eat the pig. Yeah, so it's little things like that why we're not allowed to do anymore, and it's causing waste of that food now. So what I do with my food scraps is I mean, we're quite frugal in the way we eat anyway, is that if we've got some food that's left over, so if we've made some kebabs or something and we haven't finished all the kebabs, then next day what we'll do is we'll cook the leftover kebabs in a pasta sauce, and then we'll have meatballs or something, or we'll cook it we'll cook the same dish in three different ways, and then make it last longer, so it's all used up. But when we do have waste, okay, we can't feed it to the animals, but there is an animal that I can feed it to. I can feed it to my worms, and I feed it to my worms. I make great fertilizer. I build fertility in my soil. So when I plant crops going forward, that waste has gone in and fed my plants, and it's fed my soil. So that's just one thing I'd add on that.
Yeah, thank you. And just picking up the point about the legislation barriers. Maybe it's time we challenge that. If there's someone that feels really passionately about some legislation that's getting in the way, maybe it's time to write letters to our local councillors. And I think we just need to be smarter around our food these days. It's becoming more and more apparent.
Let me just share one more story on that one.
Go
Right.
for it.
I'm in the city, and obviously having a rooster in the cities can be annoying for people. But one of my neighbours complained about having a rooster, and the local council were going to take me to court and issue me with an ASBO for having a rooster in the garden. So of all the things to get a criminal record for,
Having a rooster. How did that pan out? What happened?
Let's say the rooster's not here anymore. Oh, we got rid of the rooster. I didn't fancy having a fight in court over a rooster.
Yeah, but there are some things.
I mean, the thing is, this time around, I fancy it. This time around, I'm gonna hatch these chicks from the eggs that I mentioned. If I get a couple of roosters that I want to keep, this time around, I think I'm gonna fancy my chances with a battle, especially after the COVID, and all of that. I think communities need to be able to produce their own meat, produce their own eggs, produce their own vegetables.
I know one thing that Wendy particularly loves about your work, and sorry, Wendy is with us in the background, but she's unfortunately having internet difficulties. But I know she really appreciates the fact that your children and your family, you really do it as a family. Your children are really involved in what happens in the garden. Can you just tell us a bit more how? Because I know in England we're not so good at that. I think generally, where I think my memory of gardening as a child was it was something Dad did. We weren't involved, and your children are really involved in it. Can you just tell us a bit more about that?
I mean, like I mentioned, like when my dad had his allotment, I was probably about 6 or 7, and we were running about on the allotments, causing havoc. Messing about, running onto this person's plot and running onto that person's plot, and just causing a nuisance, really. But they were really, the old men, the old women, they were really nice to us. They didn't chase us away, right? They allowed us to do whatever we were doing there. And it's that is one of the things that I wanted my kids to know, that look, this is something that there's a skill here, there's a hobby here, and there's a good way of us spending time together. We can learn something. Little things like, when I bought those fruit trees, just We can turn it into a maths lesson, right? Okay, we bought 6 trees for £36 or £35. How much is it per tree? You know, turn it into a maths lesson. Or we were doing some soil testing the other day. So we took a spade full of soil from each one of our garden beds. Now counted all the worms that we found. What kind of creepy crawlies do we find? We have these little treasure hunts and stuff. Okay, who can find them? Go and take a clipboard, take a pen, and go make who can make the longest list of creepy crawlies that you found. Yeah, and my little lad, he's 3, and he'll be walking about and with worms in his hands. He'll have worms in his pockets, you know, coming to the house with worms in his pocket. And they're not, the good thing is they're not scared of touching these kind of things with their bare hands. I'm still a bit squeamish about touching a worm, you know, with my bare hands. But they're not afraid at all. Because they've been brought up just doing it. They're not scared of getting their hands dirty. Which is sort of the barrier I had to overcome a little bit, because I mean, I've come from an office job, so I'm coming from an office job into a garden and getting my hands dirty. But I mean, one of the things my mum says is that I'm not made to be inside. I'm not physically built to be indoors. I'm not you know, God didn't create me to be inside. Yeah, but I do like having the kids involved, because I work during the day, I teach during the evening, so my shift runs pretty much from 9 o'clock to 11 o'clock every day. And the only time I get is my weekends. And if I'm out in the garden and they're not with me, then I'm never seeing them. So they've got to be with me. They've got to be around me. They've got, you know, we've got to see each other.
Yeah,
And
that's twofold, you know, time with your children and also passing on valuable skills. And I think something you touched on at the beginning is that most of our kids in England anyway don't know where their food comes from. There's a real disconnect in the relationship between food production and food eating, and you know, I've worked with teenagers a lot, and they really do. On the whole, it's really shocking. I found it really shocking to see the lack of understanding and knowledge about where food comes from. So anything, I think, that inspires our next generation to get passionate about food, fantastic. Yeah. Do you do anything like that with your nieces, Cathy?
Well, their dad does a seriously good job. He and granddad as well. Yeah, there is lots growing, and the kids have been involved in planting the seedlings and the daily watering, and building the raised beds. There's a pile of fruit plants will be going in soon, and indeed bees will be arriving this month, 2 beehives.
that's one. That's one that I really want. I want some bees in the garden.
I was wondering that. I thought you've got to be onto that at some point, surely. Yeah, it's got to be somewhere on the agenda. Yeah. So thinking again about like where can we begin? So if someone's in a flat, hasn't got any outdoor space, you know, is it worth growing a bit of something rather than nothing at all? And if so, what's the kind of simple things that people might be able to do?
For me, I think everyone should be growing something. I mean, if you remember back to our school days, everyone's grown some cress in an eggshell, right? So even if it's just a little bit of cress for your sandwich, that's something that you can grow, and you can grow and eat yourself. Herbs are really easy ones. You know, herbs, coriander, basil. Basil will need a bit more warmth before you get it started, but parsley, things like sage, lavender. These are things that you can just put in a pot and forget about for most of the year. Every now and then give it a little bit of water, and they do fine just on neglect. So things like that, but you can flavor your food from it. So even if you're not growing loads and loads of crops that you can that you're eating all the time, you know, even if it's something that's adding flavor to your food, yeah, you can get that. That's quite easy. Soft fruit's quite easy as well. So Cathy, when you were talking about mobile, you know, being mobile, if I've got gooseberry bushes in my garden. I've got red gooseberries, green gooseberries. I've got red currants, black currants, white currants, and they're not expensive plants. right? I bought one red currant plant for £1, gooseberry bush for £1. You know, I'm not the type of guy who goes to, you know, the expensive designer garden centers and buys a really expensive gooseberry bush. I'm the guy who goes to Poundland and buys, you know, one of those £1 plants and brings that home. And now I've got a garden full of black currants and a garden full of red currants, because I just take a cutting. So each year I'll take a couple of cuttings, give a few cuttings to people, keep a couple of cuttings for myself, and the garden's just getting bigger and bigger. So if you get some of these cheap plants, and then pot them up, and while you've got them in pots, they'll be growing. So especially if you plant them this year with soft, you know, with fruit bushes, with trees, the best time to plant them was 6 months ago. You know, it's never, now was never the best time. It's always past. Yeah.
True. Yeah, that's really true.
Yeah.
That's a very valuable thing for me to tell right now, because I'm feeling inadequate, it being May, for not having started this year. So thank you so much for making that point, that it's always going to be the case that you wish you'd started already. But in a few months' time, you could have started right now. So go for it.
Yeah.
I have sorry, go on, Martin. Go on.
Just get something planted. You know, that's my message to everyone. Just whether it's something small or something massive, just get something. You know, just touch the soil. You know, play with that bit of dirt. Get your hands dirty. Get all that mud in between your fingernails and all. Just get involved.
It's about having a relationship with it, isn't it? I think that's such an important aspect of being human. You know, we're meant to eat, we need to eat, it's an important part of our survival, and just having that relationship with it, I think, changes things. I definitely experienced that myself. And I know that's one thing. I have watched some of your YouTube videos, and I know one of the videos I saw on there is that you talk about what to plant, you know, in a month when people might not think you can plant anything. You suggest some things that can be planted and stuff like that, which is really helpful. So yeah, really helpful information. Anything else to add to that, Cathy? That question?
Not at this point.
No? Okay, great. So one question I was just thinking of to finish with. What do you think is the most important thing to consider at this time when thinking about food resilience?
I'd say working on building those relationships. You know,
Okay.
we really need to work on building those relationships, and then and finding ways of finding gaps that we can exploit. You know, things that, well, like you mentioned earlier, that how we can work together as a community, and whether it's little people, you know, individuals buying for a number of people, or whether it's people working together to grow something. That's where I'd be saying build those relationships.
Yeah, great, thank you.
Yeah, I'd absolutely second that. It's the foundation of everything. It's the foundation of finding out who in your community is experiencing food poverty now, because there will be initiatives in touch with people who have come out and admitted they're struggling, but there'll also be people who haven't admitted. There's the beautiful social interaction of growing together, preparing food together, eating together, and all the great brain chemical benefits of that sort of interaction. And there's building the long-term solutions as well. It's all about our networks, our connections with people, and how great we are with each other, how inclusive we can be.
Thank you. And I know I've been really inspired by these conversations to think about my food resiliency, because as we mentioned in the first one, I don't have a garden, and I actually live in one row of 3 houses where 3 roads have no gardens at all. So so there's a real lack of space, even if we sort of pool as a community, there's a real lack of space. But it has given me a sense of what I can engage in, even in that situation. And I've been really grateful for it. So I just wanted to add in that Wendy just sent me a comment. So I just asked this question to Wendy because she's in the background, but unfortunately not able to be on the video. And she just answered, well, I definitely came to gardening through my mother, who always gardened in a bigger and bigger vegetable garden as I grew up. And my grandmother also grew things at home. As MOTHIN said, start small and start learning, and include our own community, our own and our children's community, our community's children, sorry. His experience as a child has definitely influenced him, and now he does YouTube tutorials which are watched by thousands. Yay. And who knows what ideas we're triggering for those watching. So yes, get involved with food growing. Thanks, Wendy, and sorry you've had internet trouble, not been able to join us so much on the live video, but nice to have you in the background. So anything to finish, any last kind of final thoughts or important things at this end point? Anything to mention? Yes, Cathy?
I'm going to be strangely controversial at this point and say part of resilience is obviously our ability to work with other people. And look how much we've given up on government. We've stopped working with government. I'm asserting this as a society as a whole. We are much more prone to condemn government than to work with them. We're going to be, government obviously has an awful lot in place to implement schemes in a way that we can't as individuals. And as long as we're vilifying government, we won't be able to take advantage of that. So the invitation is to make peace with whatever resentments you may hold, and look to create partnerships with government, with your neighbours, with businesses, build resilience that way.
Fair point. I think that's a really fair point. Yeah, anything to add, Martin?
What Cathy just said just really resonates with me at the moment, because I'm going through my own internal struggles at the moment. I mean, I was a very active Labour activist, and I've just quit my membership and I've joined the Greens. So because a lot of what Cathy was saying there is really rings true for me. But I'd go back to the simple thing that I was saying before, is just get involved. You know, whatever you can do, just even if it's a little conversation like this, get involved, because we can all work together, and we can build our communities, we can build each other. You know, don't stop investing in things. You know, as people, we like things, right? But we need to start investing in people. And we need to be supporting people and getting people to be the best they can be. And that's where I'm at the minute.
Right. Thank you both so much for your comments and thoughts and ideas and all this. It's been really interesting. I just would like to, just say thanks to our live audience who've been getting involved and commenting. Particularly, I've got a comment here from John Alley, who says he's really enjoyed watching this conversation, and also said indoors you can, on your windowsill, you can grow herbs. I have 2 dwarf citrus trees indoors that we really enjoy, and it's helping my children understand where food comes from. So thanks, John, for your comments. And yeah, we've had quite a live audience this evening. I've been following. So this was in our first round of conversations. This was our most popular conversation, as I think I've said. So I hope that this will be useful to people. And thank you both for your work. Thank you, Cathy, for the document you've produced and the additions you've added to that. So just to say again, wherever you're watching or listening to this, we will have that in the description. There will be the link for the Google documents, so where you can access all these resources. Sorry, I've been dealing with Google ads today. And And also for MOTHIN's YouTube channel, it's also, you'll also find the link for that. And the Dig It Out project, do you just want to mention what the Dig It Out project is about, what you're doing with that?
So with Dig It Out, I mean, like I mentioned at the start, was gardening, permaculture, this whole sort of sphere is very white middle class dominated. So Dig It Out works on 3 fronts. It works on, one is to try and try and make building a hobby, a gardening culture where it's more inclusive. Dig It Out was born out of me receiving lots and lots of racist vile abuse. I mean, I've done a video about it specifically, just talking about, well, not talking, just reading out some of the comments that I received. And the stuff that I read on that video was some of the more mild kind of stuff. I mean, I've got young children. There's abuse directed at my children, and it gets quite graphic. And after that, I mean, I stayed quiet. That sort of abuse started from day one. So the minute I started my YouTube channel, that abuse started. So I stayed quiet for close to 2 years. At the early start of my YouTube career, I asked a few YouTubers, look, this is what's happening, and they were like, just ignore it. It's just a bit of trolling. Don't worry about it. A couple of years into it, I couldn't take it anymore. So I made that video, and I said, right, okay, this is the video. This is the abuse that I'm suffering from. At least you know now. So that's the second aspect of Dig It Out, is to work on raising awareness that there is a problem here. You know, it's not just, okay, some of the abuse that I get, I mean, people are still dismissing it as, oh, it's trolls, or it's not, you know, they're only doing it because you're on YouTube. They wouldn't do it to you if you weren't on YouTube. But since I made that video, loads of people have come forward. Unfortunately, not everyone's willing to go make an official complaint and go forward like that. But quite a few people have come forward. One woman came forward and told me that because she had a mixed race son, other plot holders were throwing stones at her. So a woman was being stoned on an allotment because she had a mixed race son. You couldn't make that up. You know, it's absolutely bonkers, some of the stories that you hear. So the other aspect, the most important aspect of Dig It Out, is to work with people who have been victims of this sort of thing and say, right, okay, we can help. We can take your case to the authorities. We can gather all the evidence for you. We can do all the investigation work on your behalf, and we can take this case to the authorities and we can pursue it. So that's our three angles: to support victims and help them raise their voice, to raise awareness that there's an issue out there, and to try and create an environment that's inclusive.
Thank you, and thanks for sharing your story around that. Just to say, the website is digitoutcampaign.com, and I would like to also invite, if we as white folk ever see that happening, can we challenge it too, please? Because, you know, there is so much power, as we've seen with Black Lives Matters, in you know, where either side of the fence we are, is if you're in the more disadvantaged situation, it's harder to speak up, and we do unfortunately have more power. I don't like that we have more power, but we do. And so let's see, you know, if we see that happening in our communities, let's challenge it, please, because it's not okay, and we all have the right to grow food. So thank you. Okay, thank you very much. I'll end the dialogue there. And just to say, the conversation next week, we have 2 more weeks left of our pilot series. So next week we are doing a bit of a special. Cathy's back again. So Cathy, I think you're in all 4 of our last conversations, actually, aren't you? Yes, you are. You are. You are. So next week, as it's our penultimate session, we thought we'd do a bit of a community chat about what's been the learning so far in this project, what have we really got from it, what's been the feedback we've had. And we're going to have a mixture of speakers who've been involved so far, people who are involved in the background, including the steering group, and some people that have really been following the project so far. So we're going to get some, you know, input from different perspectives. And we're also going to be sharing our vision for the future of the project. So the pilot is finishing on the 25th of May. We're then having a 4-week break, and then we'll be launching the project fully on the 6th of July. And we're going to have some other things that are going to be happening alongside the live talks as part of that, which hopefully Cathy and I will say a bit more about. Did you want to say anything at this point, Cathy, about that?
Well, I will mention again the community resilience advocates. So we're looking to have 100 people saying within a year that they have impacted the resilience of their community because of some inspiration from this project. And we're looking to be supportive enough of people that that is the case. So we're going to set up a series of 3-month coached projects. So we will be inviting people to join a 3-month initiative and look at what would really make a difference to the resilience of their community, which could be anything. It could be food related, it could be about supporting health in some way, it could be about making better networks in your communities. Your communities can be your local area, or it can be your extended family around the world. It can be anything that you relate to as a community. We're looking at helping you make that somehow more resilient, and we will be saying more about how we hope to support you in doing that next week and in the coming weeks.
Thank you very much. And if you're just hearing that, you think, oh my God, I really want to be a community resilience advocate. I need to do something now. You can email us on communityresilience-live-talks@gmail.com, or if you're on our Facebook group or Facebook page, sorry, it's Community Resilience Live Talks. Send us a message, get in touch. It's always nice to hear from people. So thank you very much. Go well, and thank you for all your work. MOTHIN, thanks for sharing all your inspiration and what you're up to. Really best of luck with everything you're doing.
Thanks for having me.
Great to hear.
Thank you. Okay, take care. Bye-bye.